Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue to bring you a new video about the story of Tusan and CEO Hoai. In recent days, Tusan has begun to clearly sense unusual changes in her body. A dull pain in her lower abdomen appears more frequently. Not severe, but persistent enough to leave her uneasy. Her menstrual cycle, once regular, suddenly becomes late. And as each day passes, a quiet anxiety follows, one she dares not share with anyone. She tries to reassure herself that it might just be fatigue, work pressure, or recent emotional stress, but the more she tries to ignore it, the stronger the sense of unease grows. After many sleepless nights, Tusan decides to go for a medical checkup, seeing it as a way to face head-on the doubts that have been silently growing inside her. At the hospital, the familiar smell of disinfectant and the hurried footsteps around her only heighten her tension. She sits waiting for her turn, hands tightly clasped together, her eyes unconsciously following the clock on the wall. When she enters the ultrasound room and undergoes the necessary tests, Tusan tries to remain calm, but inside, unanswered questions keep rising. Every movement of the doctor, every focused glance at the screen, makes her heart feel heavier, as if something very important is about to be revealed. The final results are delivered slowly and carefully. The doctor explains that Tusan shows signs of premature ovarian failure, a condition that makes natural pregnancy very difficult, almost impossible. The explanations that follow are steady and professional, but to Tusan, they seem wrapped in a haze. She hears them, yet struggles to fully absorb their meaning. A wave of disappointment spreads through her body, from her chest to the depths of her heart, leaving her sitting in silence for what feels like endless seconds. The doctor gently advises Tusan to consider IVF as soon as possible if she still wishes to have a child. A prescription is written, along with instructions to take the medication correctly, and return for regular follow-up visits to closely monitor her health. Everything unfolds in a methodical, clinical manner, but to Tusan, it is a heavy stream of information, marking a new boundary in her life that she was never mentally prepared to cross. Leaving the hospital, Tusan walks slowly down the long corridor, the soft sound of her footsteps echoing clearly in the quiet space. The medical report in her hand suddenly feels unbearably heavy, as if carrying fears she has yet to name. Outside, people rush by, each absorbed in their own lives, while Tusan feels frozen amid the flow, confused and lost. She wonders what she did wrong, what she might have missed, or whether this is simply an unexpected turn that life has placed upon her shoulders. Self-blaming thoughts follow one after another without end. Tusan thinks about the future, about marriage, about the expectations society and family often place on women. She thinks of CEO Hoai, of a relationship slowly moving toward more significant steps, and the fear of losing the peace she currently has tightens her chest. She stands before an incredibly difficult choice: to keep this truth to herself or to tell everything to CEO Hoai. She worries that entering marriage without the ability to have children might make her a burden, that she might never be fully accepted, and that the good things she now cherishes could gradually begin to crack. That heavy feeling stays with Tusan all the way home. Each step seems slower, each thought deeper, signaling that new upheavals and challenges are quietly waiting ahead. The video ends in that subdued atmosphere, leaving behind an unsettling silence, one in which Tusan must face her fears, the truth, and the decisions that could change her entire life. Leaving the hospital, Tusan stepped outside with the feeling that she had just lost some invisible source of support. Everything before her looked the same: The street was still crowded with people passing by. The familiar noise of traffic still filled the air. Yet inside she felt strangely empty. Each step grew slower and heavier, as if her legs were no longer strong enough to carry the rush of thoughts flooding her mind. She clenched her hands, forcing herself to take a deep breath. But the sense of confusion refused to fade. So many questions surfaced one after another, without warning, without giving her time to prepare. What should I do now? The question repeated itself, echoing in her mind like a call with no reply. If she continued to love Hai, if they were to marry someday, would he be able to accept a woman who might not be able to have children? Just thinking about it made Tusan's heart ache. She understood clearly that marriage was not only about the bond between two people, but also about responsibilities, expectations, and countless things that could never be fully spoken aloud. Then another thought followed, just as heavy. If she kept this truth hidden, would that make her selfish? She feared that her silence would turn into a prolonged lie, an unspoken burden placed upon the relationship she cherished so deeply. But if she told the truth, would she lose everything? Would that truth cause everything to collapse, making the love she and Hai had carefully built more fragile than ever? These thoughts intertwined and overlapped, leaving Tusan's mind spinning, unable to find a way out. More than anyone, Tusan knew that marriage was never just a matter between two people. It also meant children, family, and the silent yet heavy expectations of loved ones around them. Thinking of Hai, of how much he loved children, of how his eyes always lit up whenever he saw a little one, her heart grew even heavier. She could not bring herself to imagine the moment she might have to face that look if the truth were ever revealed. Her fear was no longer only for herself, but for the future of them both. When she arrived home, Tusan quietly stepped into the familiar space that gave her a rare sense of safety. Ivy ran toward her and wrapped her in a hug, full of a child's carefree excitement. Tusan bent down and held her tightly, as if only that warmth could keep her standing amid the storm of emotions raging inside. She lifted Ivy onto her lap. The two of them shared some candied coconut, the gentle sweetness spreading on their tongues, simple and familiar. Then they gathered eggs together, laughing and chatting about the most childlike things, small moments that were enough to fill the house with warmth. Ivy remained carefree and innocent, her clear eyes untouched by any of the worries that burden adults. She laughed, she talked, she shared the simplest stories, and that very innocence both soothed and pierced Tusan's heart at the same time. Tusan tried to smile along with her, to keep her voice steady, hiding the turmoil deep inside. All she wished for was to protect Ivy's peaceful childhood, unshadowed by the sadness and anxieties of grown-ups, even as she herself struggled to hold on to that fragile calm. Amid the piling worries, as the house slowly returned to its familiar quiet, Tusan sat alone with her thoughts. She let her emotions drift slowly, without rushing, without avoiding them. In that silence, she reminded herself that she could not keep running away. No matter how difficult the road ahead might be, no matter the outcome, she could not give up. Facing the truth might hurt, but avoidance would only make the pain last longer. And in that moment, where vulnerability and determination intertwined, Tusan understood that this was only the beginning of even greater challenges waiting for her in the days to come. After many sleepless nights in a row, when time seemed to be measured only by long stretches of silence and heavy breaths in the darkness, Tusan gradually came to understand something she did not want to admit. She no longer had the courage to face it. She had thought too much, thought until all emotions felt worn down, leaving only exhaustion and a dull, nameless pain. Tusan loved CEO Hai, loved him with all her sincerity and depth. And precisely because of that love, she could not allow herself to be selfish. She did not want him to enter a marriage burdened with lingering regrets and invisible pressures that could last a lifetime. In those quiet nights, the more she thought, the more she believed that leaving might be the only way to protect the man she loved, even though that choice left her heart aching beyond words. One very early morning, when the city was still asleep, the streets deserted and yellow streetlights faintly glowing on the corners, Tusan quietly packed her belongings. She did everything softly, as if afraid of waking not only Ivy, but also the warm memories that had once filled this house. Ivy was still sleeping soundly, her breathing steady, her young face so peaceful that it made Tusan's heart tighten. She sat down beside her child, gently brushed her fingers through Ivy's soft hair, then leaned down and kissed her forehead for a long time, as if trying to engrave this moment into her heart. Tears welled up, but Tusan held them back, refusing to let them fall with a sound. There was no commotion, no farewell, only slow footsteps and a hand tightly holding her child's. Tusan took Ivy's hand and left the house that had once been full of memories, the place where she had believed she could stay forever. On the table, in the empty and silent space, there was only a hastily written note. The handwriting was uneven, trembling like the writer's own heart, yet every line carried a painful finality. "Hi, please don't look for me. I don't have the courage to stay. I hope you will forget me and live a truly happy life." When CEO Hai returned home, the door opened to a house so empty it sent a chill through him. There was no Tusan, no Ivy's clear laughter, none of the familiar presence that had once made this place warm. Silence enveloped everything, squeezing his heart tight. Hai's eyes stopped at the thin piece of paper lying quietly on the table. Just reading those few short lines made his heart drop straight to the bottom. Panic rushed over him, leaving him barely able to stand. He frantically made call after call, but all that answered him were endless ringing tones and the message that the number could not be reached. In his confusion and despair, Hai called Hung and then hoaica. Upon hearing the news, both were stunned. No one could understand how Tusan could leave so suddenly, without warning, without leaving any clear clue behind. All they knew was that something very serious must have happened, something heavy enough to make Tusan choose to disappear in silence. Without time to think, they split up to search, hearts filled with worry and fear, haunted by the worst possibilities. Amid familiar streets and places marked by the couple's memories, Hai suddenly thought of the beach. It was where they had once walked hand in hand along the shore, where the sea wind blew freely and Tusan had said that just being by his side like that was enough. The memory surfaced so vividly that it made his heart ache. Without another thought, Hai drove off almost unconsciously, his hands trembling as they gripped the steering wheel. His heart flooded with anxiety and fear. And then, amid the salty wind and the ceaseless rhythm of the waves, Hai saw Tusan. She stood there holding Ivy's hand tightly, her slender figure turned toward the sea, as if one more step would make her dissolve into the vast emptiness ahead. In that moment, all of Hai's emotions exploded at once. Relief, pain, and panic colliding together. Would Hai be able to bring Tusan back? Would the two of them be strong enough to overcome this hardship together? Everything remained unanswered, leaving behind a heavy pause that compels viewers to wait for what will unfold in the next episode.
Xin chào mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Nay mình tiếp tục đưa đến video tiếp theo của câu chuyện Tiểu San nha mọi người. Thì hôm nay Tiểu San và CEO Hải đang đang có một chút chuyện. Bây giờ thì mình vẫn đang edit video chưa có xong. Bây giờ thì mình đang tạo ảnh thumbnail. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem video. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người nhé.